There's a fresh new twist to the saga of Russian mercenary chief Yevgeny Prigozhin. Now, the Kremlin has made the big claim that Putin held post-mutiny talks with the Wagner chief Yevgeny Prigozhin and his fighters, that too 5 days after the mutiny ended. Now, Prigozhin was among 35 of the Wagner Group's commanders invited to Moscow. According to Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov, Prigozhin assured Putin that his Wagner troops were loyal to Russia. He also said that the commanders themselves presented their version of what happened, and Wagner boss assured that they were ready to continue to fight for their homeland. Peskov did not comment on Prigozhin's whereabouts, which remain unclear, especially after the back and forth coming in from Belarus's President Lukashenko, who first said that Prigozhin is in Belarus and later backtracked. Now, the Russian president's spokesperson Dmitry Peskov informed that the meeting lasted for 3 hours. Remember, Prigozhin ended the mutiny after a deal was brokered for him to be exiled to Belarus. Also, on 10th of July, Russia's defense ministry published a video featuring the country's military chief. The first time General Gerasimov was shown since the rebellion aimed to oust him as well. During last month's revolt, Mr. Prigozhin repeatedly denounced the general for failing to provide his fighters in Ukraine with much-needed ammunition. These updates appear to be an attempt by Moscow to take control of the narrative after a turbulent period. But what remains are the conflicting versions to this story. Let's find out what's made this story so inevitably bizarre. And for that, I'm joined in by Charles Carithas, who's a fellow at the National Security Institute. Many thanks to you, Charles, for joining in. First, Lukashenko says Prigozhin is in Belarus, then he says he is not and is in Russia, a claim that's finally being backed by the Kremlin now. What does it speak of Prigozhin and his whereabouts as he continues to remain missing from public view?
You know, what's really interesting about this is that just 2 weeks ago, we had what many thought and what really certainly looked like a coup orchestrated by the leader of the Wagner Group, Prigozhin. You know, for the first time, we were beginning to see like a sense of vulnerability to the total control of Russia that Putin has exerted since he came to power in around the year 2000. So the fact that this news that came out of the Kremlin, that this face-to-face meeting between Vladimir Putin and the leader of the Wagner Group and other senior leadership is, to my estimation, quite emblematic of the Kremlin and Putin really trying to save face.
Charles, many are also wondering if Putin did not value Prigozhin, then why did he have that 3-hour meeting? It only also goes on to indicate that Prigozhin did exercise a great, considerable amount of control, not just over Putin, but Kremlin as well.
Right. So that's a key question, is the why. Why did this meeting take place? I think it was very important for Vladimir Putin and the Kremlin to project a sense of stability and solidarity to the rest of the world, which is, to his estimation, wanted to really dispel any sense of a loosening of his grip on power. You know, we have to keep in mind that Russia, in many estimations, has lost between 27,000 to as high as 50,000 soldiers during this unjust, illegal invasion of Ukraine. So showing that he still has a sense of unity and solidarity within his military apparatus, and that he still exerts authoritarian control in the midst of this absolute military blunder, this failure in Ukraine, I think is important to the survival of Putin's regime.
Right. On that note, in fact, I'm going to request you, Charles, to continue to stay with me, because it's important to take our viewers also through the kind of reactions that have come in. To begin with, we also have the reaction of the Kremlin spokesperson, Dmitry Peskov. Let's listen into what he has to say.
It is true that the President Vladimir Putin did have this meeting with Wagner chief. He invited 35 people to it. All the commanders of the units and the management of the Wagner private military company, including Prigozhin himself. That meeting took place in the Kremlin on June the 29th. It lasted for almost 3 hours. Because if you are prepared to fight until the last man standing, this is one of the facilities that significantly raises the stakes. By the way, you touched upon a very interesting topic. Do you know what exact kind of nuclear weapons are in Voron-45? Apart from regular nuclear charges, there used to be, and there still are, what in Soviet Union was called backpacks. Yes, backpacks. So-called units of backpackers, a folk name. These are extremely small nuclear charges which are portable that can be transported in a backpack.
Начальник главного штаба воздушно-космических сил, доложите.
Пострадавших нет. Исходя из оценки обстановки решил прикрытие назначенных важнейших объектов в районах ответственности за противотушку.
Воздушно-космические силы с поставленной задачей справились. Цель обеспечения безопасности ударов ракет противника требует главному командованию ВКС с главного разведуправления продолжить системную работу по выявлению дополнительных мер для повышения защиты этих объектов от ударов с воздуха.
All right, Charles, so we just played out this video of Gerasimov, which has been released by the Kremlin on 10th of July, while there is no certainty with regards to the timeline of this video or with regards to the date. But having said that, the conscious thought behind the Kremlin release of this video featuring Gerasimov, how do you see now the Kremlin trying to take charge of the entire narrative that's been surrounding Vladimir Putin and the kind of power crisis within Russia's internal power structure that's grabbed international headlines now?
Yes, well, if we are to take anything coming out of the Kremlin for face value, I think what's really unique here is the symbolism of Prigozhin and the other, some maybe 35 Wagner leaders professing their loyalty and recommitment to Putin and ensuring the safety of their motherland, Russia. You know, what's really, really important here is the idea that Putin still has power in the face of this immense military blunder and failure, which has cost the lives of tens of thousands of Russians. You know, to many Russians, you know, Putin has failed. And to Putin, he needs to somehow re-exert his sense of power, his sense of solidarity among the military class in Moscow, to really show the world that he still is this leader to be feared.
Charles, treason in Russia is, there is no pardon for treason in Russia. How does this battle between Putin and Prigozhin get even more complicated because of the involvement of the army? Charles, I'd like to know from you what has been the role of the army when it comes to this battle between Prigozhin and Putin?
Yes, so it is my estimation that Putin realizes that he really needs the Wagner Group here. The Wagner Group is really the paramilitary wing of the Russian military. It's their force projection. It gives Putin the ability to exert certain amounts of control and to give him a sense of what many believe a sense of plausible deniability when it comes to some of their heinous actions. Keep in mind that the Wagner Group is made up of a lot of unsavory individuals with questionable character, many of which are hardened criminals. And it's really an aspect of force projection and augmentation to the Russian military, which, you know, has already seen devastating losses. So I think the calculus by Vladimir Putin is that he actually needs the men of the Wagner Group to really augment his losses.
All right, and while that does seem like a fair point that you are making, the fact does remain, what will be the messaging if Putin does compromise with Prigozhin? Because going by Putin's past actions against his critics, whether politicians, scientists, or even journalists, what are the chances for Prigozhin to be an exception?
Well, there certainly is the possibility of Prigozhin being the exception, given his stature within the Wagner Group and the amount of men that he commands. I think for Putin, it's important for him to show a sense of solidarity among Russia's military apparatus, and I think that's his play.